why is your language so difficult to understand when I speak Indonesian, for example? Well, the short answer, for the first time I say it in public, is that I don't want to insult your intelligence by dumbing down my message. And so, you could pause the video and I want you to watch it so that you get something out of it. You can watch it, go to Google, come back there again. You know what I mean?
Thank you very much.
So for all of these content creators, just expose yourself to difficult topics. And
because that's how you learn.
Welcome back to What Is Up Indonesia podcast. My name is Andovi Lopez.
I'm Abigail Limuria.
And I'm Bagus Muljadi. I was waiting for your cue, but anyway.
No. I was going to do super side. And finally, WIUI podcast. On our third podcast, we have a guest. Yay! We have a guest, Bagus.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for being here.
Great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So I call you, your full name is Bagus Muljadi, but we're going to call you Bagus.
Yes.
Okay. So for those of you who are like, okay, so what's this episode going to be about? What are we going to talk about? First, we get to know, we need to want to know our guest first.
Yep.
So Bagus, can you please explain or tell the crowd who you are, what you do?
Hi everyone, Bagus Muljadi here. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Nottingham in the UK. That's about it.
What do you study there?
What do you study there?
Okay, so I'm a lecturer at the Department of Chemical and Environmental Engineering. I'm a mathematician by formation, loosely, applied mathematician. So I do research, I teach undergraduate, postgraduate, PhD students, and I'm Indonesian, so I'm really looking forward to disseminate whatever I know in the UK and elsewhere back home, I think.
Okay, that's great.
Great.
Can I just know a bit more of your past? So did you go to school here? How did you get to Nottingham? Like your whole life's journey. I want to know.
Right, so it's going to be a bit of a while, but
it's okay. We have all the time.
Right, I'm Jakartan. I was born in Jakarta, not specifically in one place because you keep moving around. My parents didn't really have a permanent place to stay. I studied throughout my undergraduate study in Bandung in ITB.
Oh, ITB. Okay.
And I was a mechanical engineering student.
Okay.
And then I continued my postgraduate. That would include master and PhD in Taiwan.
In Taiwan?
In Taiwan.
Oh, taking what? Mechanical engineering also? Or
applied physics.
Applied physics. Okay.
Right. So that's a slight change of discipline. And then my academic career has been consisted of a postdoc stint at Institut de Mathématiques de Toulouse in France.
Okay.
And then at Imperial College London at Earth Science and Department. So my tenured position is at the University of Nottingham now in Chemical Engineering Department. Wow. So it's been widely varied, I think.
Nice. Wow. And can you tell us a little bit on why you're currently here in Indonesia?
Yeah.
Partly because I have parents still in Jakarta.
Right?
Yeah, okay, of course.
Yeah. So that I always look forward to coming back to Indonesia. But growingly, I think in the last 2 years or so, I started to spearhead knowledge exchange activities on behalf of the university with Indonesian stakeholders in general. So we built collaborations with universities in Indonesia, and then we built collaborations with provincial governments, with central governments, and try to be that bridge that facilitates knowledge exchange. And knowledge exchange includes advising policy making and then facilitating mobility of staffs and students from universities that we have networked with. And then I have this new endeavor, let's say, with some of like-minded people, and that is to spread I wouldn't call it, but I would call it anyway, like a scientific thinking to Indonesian people. I think Indonesian people have a lot of potentials, and I think to unlock those potentials and to make Indonesia can project itself positively in a post-colonial world, people need science. And one of the things that I'm trying to champion is a new narrative, and that is Indonesia as the global laboratory.
Indonesia as the global laboratory
for new sciences to emerge.
For new sciences to emerge. Okay, this is very interesting.
Yeah. We have narratives, obviously.
Right.
We have phrases like Indonesia as a poros maritime, poros maritim,
poros maritim,
lumbung pangan,
paru-paru dunia.
So this is just a new narrative, and I think Indonesia has mostly been unaware of its own potential, not as a country where natural resources can be excavated and then sold as raw materials, but as places where if you were to look for new solutions to the climate change, problems that you look to Indonesia to find solutions, because we are the place where more than 50% of global geothermal reserves is actually beneath our feet. But to unlock those potentials, and geothermal is just one of those vast potentials, you need science.
Right.
I think there's a lot of homework needs to be solved when it comes to translating this science into policies. I think there's a lot of homework when it comes to translating academic ways of working in the policy making. I think, for all of those reasons, I think I'm here.
Okay.
I see. And you did mention a little bit about scientific thinking and how we in Indonesia we needed more like a new narrative in regards to scientific thinking, right? So when you say scientific thinking, I bet a lot of people immediately think about like, studying biology or studying
physics,
chemistry.
Yeah.
What do you mean exactly by scientific thinking?
I think the most popular dichotomy that I heard that uses the word science is science versus mysticism. And then the antidote to mysticism is scientific thinking, but loosely just science usually. And one needs to understand that mysticism, for example, is a worldview. Science is a tool.
Yes.
Science isn't a worldview. Science doesn't operate in the domain of ought. Science operates in the domain of is or how things are meant to be done. Mysticism is a worldview. That is to say that anything that is mysterious are not to be believed as true. If you were to compare these worldviews, you will have to then compare mysticism and scientism.
Yes.
This scientism as a word is used is sometimes confused with scientific thinking. So this is just a common philosophy terminology that I need to make clear. Scientism or naturalism is a worldview that says only those facts or claims that are to be proven in a laboratory setting that are to be believed in or that to be hold as true. But that's problematic. You see, that's problematic. Scientific thinking is supposed to be the way of thinking that has the same principles as the principle used in doing science altogether.
Right.
Such as?
Can you break it down?
Those are scientific thinking is new. Scientific thinking is probably can be traced back to the age of Francis Bacon, for example. Okay. That is to say that you got a deductive way of thinking, inductive way of thinking. You probably could trace back to Aristotle, but at the time there was no falsifiability and so forth. So if you think scientifically, it means that you uphold this logical way of thinking.
Right.
If you deduce facts from deductive reasoning, it means you believe in the premises that upholds that conclusion.
Right.
And the conclusion were to be believed as true and binding, regardless you like it or not, if the premises were true. And if you came to a conclusion using inductive reasoning, then you also understand that the conclusion is not to be binding. It's just probable.
Right.
All right.
Right.
So these are the main principle of scientific thinking. And it cannot stand alone. It has to be undergirded by ethics. It has to be undergirded by integrity.
Right.
That's overall the ecosystem from which scientific thinking can grow.
Right.
And so to think scientifically means to uphold all of these ways of working to come up with your conclusions. So that's loosely what I think of.
Okay, this is very interesting because I'm curious to how you, because you clearly grew up in the Indonesian education system.
Yes,
you said
I did.
You were in Jakarta.
Yeah.
You moved to ITB. Of course, ITB, one of the best universities in Indonesia, especially when it comes to scientific thinking and their disciplines.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to how you, when you were in middle school or high school, which middle school or high school did you go to?
Oh, Gunung Sari. I was in Smok 3, Penabur.
Oh, Penabur.
Yes, I was,
Okay.
I went to Penabur too.
You did?
Actually.
Wait, which Penabur?
Which one is
the
it?
same?
Cipinang Indah for me.
Oh, near the jail? No.
Near the...
No, never mind.
Maybe.
Millennial joke. Never mind.
The reason why I'm asking this is one of the things that we want to put out in this What Is Up Indonesia podcast is if you could be this person, if you could be what you are today, there must have been a system or a progress since you were a child in the Indonesian education system that got you here. Was it the Indonesian education system? Was it you yourself? Was it your parents? Was it your family? Like, because I'm curious. Because clearly, look, I know personally many smart Indonesians, but I feel like they're the exception that was born despite of the system. Not because of the system.
All right, that's a good point of view.
Right, and that's why I'm curious for people like you who clearly you got this. Was it because of the system or in spite of the system?
Well, I'm pretty untraditional in terms of the ways that I went through to become who I am today right now. Because usually Indonesian professors in the Anglo-American world, they are usually a product of very successful formal education systems. And they're usually scholarship recipients. I'm neither of those two.
So you were neither a scholarship recipient, you weren't?
Yes. And I was always, back in the days we used to do ranking systems in school. Right? I don't know if you And then just to rub that pain inside of you, I was always have my grades laden with red ink, and then
I remember that.
I'm always at the near the bottom of the hierarchy of the education system. So not traditional in that case. So I wouldn't call myself smart either. I think throughout my education system, although I went to one of those elite school in for my high school, but I'm still a bottom student there. And that trajectory continues when I was in ITB as well. I graduated with very low GPA. So all of the things that make me who I am right now is quite a coincidence, basically. So I couldn't get a scholarship. So I went to cheap countries like Taiwan so I could continue my education while working part-time. So I become, for a brief period in my time, a distributor for a small company in Taiwan. It's a pump-making factories.
A pump-making
factory. It's pneumatic pumps, it's centrifugal pumps. And then, so these are pumps for high viscosity fluids. They usually use it for ship building. And then I say, well, we got a big ship-making factory in Indonesia. Can I sell your pumps for a percentage of commission? And then so I got some of funding to finish my PhD. And then one thing leads to another. I met my wife, then my girlfriend, who happened to be a European citizen. And then I said, well...
Sorry, is she Indonesian?
She's German.
Oh, she's German. Okay, got it.
Right, so I met a German girl at the time. And then
in Taiwan?
In Taiwan.
Interesting, okay.
It was quite interesting because that opened up the dream to continue my career in the West. I've never been to the West before. And I thought in order to do that successfully, I better have a PhD. So I finished my degree. And then that brought me to France. And then at Nottingham where I ended. So that was quite not traditional. And also amongst professors in the UK, they usually either UK graduates or American graduates because it's very competitive to get a kind of position in the UK. So I'm just one of the few that actually came from lower rank universities in my formative years, and also from the East. So I wouldn't say that my life story is one to be taken an example of. I wouldn't suggest people to be at the bottom of the formal education system and hope that they will become a professor in the UK. So wasn't really proud about it. But that just, I think it says something about the marginalized community in the formal education system in Indonesia. It goes on to say that just because you're in the bottom of the hierarchy in the formal education landscape in Indonesia does not mean you cannot have a career in academia.
Okay.
That's interesting.
But okay, so that is the path that got you into like your current career, I would say, right?
Yes.
But I think there's the more like deeper question about that is the way you think. Like where does the appreciation of scientific thinking comes from?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Because obviously, like a lot of people grew up going through the same education system as you and not appreciating the scientific thinking, right? As much, at least. Or
all right, I'm gonna be. I think. I don't like to put blame on other people rather than myself, but I do.
Blame. I love it.
All right, but, okay, here goes.
Okay.
I think those who are successful, I noticed this from some of the characters of people that were successful in my class. if you're good with conformity, you're likely to be successful in Indonesia. If you're good at rehearsing very difficult mathematical problems, that you'll end up with good grades. But it doesn't seem to be serving you well when it comes to very wild thinking, very antithetical thinking.
I love this.
And so the question is, what makes me appreciative of all of the scientific thinking that I bring forward to this conversation now is because of the fact that I was forced to change disciplines several times because I was never successful in one. So like I said before, I wasn't successful during my high school. And so that forces me to scramble to find new disciplines. So I did my undergrad. I wasn't in mechanical engineering. I wasn't successful in mechanical engineering. I had really low GPA. And the only opportunities that came to my table was to do a postgraduate study in applied physics. And that wasn't because of my merit. It was, I never tell this anywhere else, but I'll tell you what the story was that got me there. People think, wow, how did you then end up in an elite university in Taiwan? So here's what happens. So I was about to graduate in ITB, right? And my GPA was 2.69 or something, which is way below the average at the time. So I know I couldn't rely on my grades to get scholarship or to get a job in multinational companies because they would just, the HRD would just brush your application aside, right? And then so at the time I used just Google, and then I just, type with some keywords, study Taiwan computational fluid dynamics, because that was just my thesis during my time in ITB. And a couple of professors came up, right? And I just shotgun every one of them with a letter.
Code lettering. So
with a letter. I'm really good with words, by the way. So I'm really good at writing.
Okay.
And then in that letter, I still have that letter actually. One day I'll conceal it to the people. I said in that letter who my name is and the projects that I'm doing during my undergrad and how good I am in the things that I do. Under the assumption that they wouldn't know what that GPA correlates to, even if I tell them, right? So just basically selling myself. And one professor got convinced. And his name was Professor Yang Chaoyan. He's now passed away. But he was a professor in Taiwan. And then he was surprised. And then he replied to my email within an hour. And he said, okay, I'm surprised to get your email. This seems to be the things that we are doing here as well. How can I help you? Do you want to come here? We don't have scholarship though. We have a little bit of research money. It's just translated to 100 euros or so a month, which is barely enough to get by. But what I can do is to try to convince the admission body to get you in. And so I got into National Taiwan University, which is Taiwan's best university without them even checking my GPA.
Oh, wow.
That was the remarkable story.
Wow.
Right. So I got there as the only foreign student in that institution in the hardest department in NTU, with them not knowing what my grades correlates to, either good, bad, or average, simply because that professor I sent an email to convinced the admission body to take me.
Wow.
So, for those looking for scholarship, just to segue into the question.
I love this.
It's not just because your grades are good, it's because you look relentlessly for opportunities. That actually is quite an unusual way of getting there. Now, I forgot what your main question was. So,
where does your appreciation towards scientific thinking
come
from?
So there goes my first stint in applied physics, right? And then that opened up the way towards going to the European institution. So again, I got a job in France after I graduated, simply because of those letters again that I write upon my graduation from Taiwan. I said,
you literally bypass the academic,
the things you can get just by writing good and writing good
Right.
Which is what I think Indonesian students are not well versed in. Especially science students. They have absolutely no idea how to write.
Wow. Okay.
Right. And I did this. I understand this because I receive emails from many Indonesian students who want to seek opportunities in the UK. And when it comes to receiving email from Indonesian students and Iranian students or even Chinese students, the quality is very They have absolutely no idea how to sell themselves. How do you even begin with convincing people to receive them or to even look at the emails? Have no idea.
this is very interesting.
Okay. But anyway, and then so I got to the mathematics department in Toulouse because I wrote emails and because I explained to them what my works correlates to, and then I get there, and similarly to Imperial College. So I got all of these interdisciplinary portfolios.
Wow.
And so that shapes my way of thinking into assessing certain problems from very different point of view. That to me constitutes critical thinking. Like, let me give you a concrete example. So, for example, what got me the job in Imperial College, for example, which is at I think one of the world's finest earth science department. You know, this is Royal School of Mines, they call it. Anything Royal. Royal School of Mines. Anyway, so I had a brief period in Toulouse where the problem that was faced and given to me was to solve dispersion of pollutants in the city.
Okay.
So in 2002, there was a fertilizer plant that exploded in the city of Toulouse, and it contaminated the whole city, and then they have health problems there. And then the government was scrambling, tried to prevent the same scenario from happening again. Okay. So they go to the universities, Paul Sabatier University in France, and say, can we have a numerical modeling tool so that when things like this happen again, we can evacuate people in real time, right? So mathematicians were scratching their heads. Okay, here's the problem of the city. This is the most layman way I've ever explained this problem. So if you look at the city, for example, from a bird's eye perspective,
right,
and then you want to solve pollution problem, you have to take away all the buildings because pollution cannot go through the building, right?
Okay.
They can only go through the streets because the buildings are assumed as opaque.
Okay.
All right. Now, the problem is this. If I want to solve accurately this problem in a city domain, well, the city is kilometer length scale.
Right.
Right. And the smallest object in the city might be your glass or whatever is probably centimeter scale. From centimeters to kilometers, that's 6 orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
Yep.
Big difference,
Big
right?
difference.
So you cannot, bottom line, even the most advanced computer cannot solve that in real time.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. We can solve this, but it will take a week. People die then.
Right.
All right, so mathematicians will come up with this idea of multi-scale model. So that's what I was doing.
Okay.
Now, at the same time, earth science in London have the same problems. Try to get oil and hydrocarbons out from the underground, from the pores of rocks.
Okay.
Engineers in oil field have the same problems. Look, okay, these oil fields are between the grains and inside the pores. How do we get them out? Because the reservoir is of kilometer length scale, and the pores are centimeter, millimeter, even nanoscopic, right?
Yep.
How do we do this? And then I say, look, we got this new method in France, man. If you look at it from the bird's eye perspective, it kind of looked like a rock. And this guy in Imperial was like, yeah, that sounds brilliant. I don't know what it is because we're not mathematicians, but that sounds convincing. And voila, I got the job.
Because it was a unique perspective on a different on another.
Right. So then I learned that the same problem assessed from very different perspectives gets you more nuanced understanding of that problem, and therefore progress in that field.
Got it.
Love it.
Right. Similarly, with Indonesia, when you look at the same problem from very different discipline, and if you are used to thinking in very different perspective, which requires tolerance, by the way.
Yes.
Then you'll end up with better understanding. And that's very, very difficult to articulate at a popular level.
Yeah, that's
This
very
is the
hard.
first time in a podcast I explained about.
No, I love it. No,
I think you did a really good job. And the thing about what you just explained is how you approach that problem. That is the scientific way of thinking, right? The way you approach and assess the problem and then connect the dots between multidisciplinary fields like here and there.
Right.
That requires that is the scientific approach, the tool that you use, and the critical thinking and problem solving skill as well.
That's one of them.
Yeah.
That's one of them. Let me give you how that translates to practical Indonesian problems, right?
Okay.
Right.
When it comes to trying to understand whether one thing is scientific or not, people don't seem to have the tool to understand that yet. So they would put under the blanket statement that anything mystic or sounds mystic are to be brushed aside. But you could actually approach that problem with scientific thinking. Okay, what about belief in God? Is that mysticism? Well, it's certainly mysterious, right? Can you apply scientific thinking there to assess? Well, I spoke of deductive reasoning. And okay, let's use that, for example. What are the arguments for the existence of God? Well, you could try, and philosophers have been trying to do this with scientific thinking, right?
Yep.
Since forever.
One is the Al-Ghazalian way of proving God exists with Kalam cosmological argument. Let's say the first premise goes, whatever begins to exist has a cause.
Yeah.
Doesn't say God. And the second premise goes, the universe began to exist. The conclusion goes,
therefore,
the universe
there must be a cause.
There must be a cause.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the scientific bit is not just that you can deduce that with syllogism.
Right.
The scientific bit is that every single premise in that argument is falsifiable.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's what I mean. Every theory in mathematics, in earth scientists, are falsifiable.
That's the key.
Which means you can prove it wrong.
Right.
Like, for example, the second premise goes, the universe began to exist. You certainly can prove it wrong.
Yes.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
And then the reason why premise 2 is popular is because the recent theory of Big Bang, right? And which says that the universe cannot be pulled infinitely to the past. There is a space-time boundary in the past, so it began to exist, loosely speaking, and therefore the conclusion holds. Well, can you then use the same deductive argument for atheism? Of course you can.
Of course you can. Yeah.
Right. The problem of evil, for example.
Right.
Premise 1 goes, if God exists, there cannot be needless suffering. Premise 2 goes, there is needless suffering.
Therefore
God does not exist. But you see, if you apply scientific thinking, it opens the way for conversation and radicalism.
Yeah. Okay, so
Right.
talking about radicalism, mysticism, tolerance on different viewpoints.
Like you said, Indonesia as a culture, it's still very fond of mysticism, like the culture itself.
Yes.
Like the people, I think we still very fond of mysticism. There's even like still a lot of like mystic-based policy that the government make based on like certain dates.
Guys, until now, every single big event, we have Barara doing the whole rain thing.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the dumbest things I've ever seen.
Right.
Sorry.
So a lot of people.
Some of them are dumb, yes.
Yeah. And you mentioned a little bit that some people assume that we just need to replace that with science. And it's something that can be replaceable. Like mysticism needs to go down, scientific thinking up. But it seems to me that what you're saying, it's not as simple as that.
Yes.
And maybe it's a false dichotomy, between like mysticism, or maybe I don't know. So maybe you can comment further on that.
It's a long explanation on this in my view, but I think people confuse these three terms: science, scientism,
and
scientific thinking. They use this interchangeably. I think they think they are the same. They're not the same. Science is a tool. Scientism is a worldview.
Yes.
Scientism says that only those that can be proven in a laboratory setting are those to be
like you said before,
as true.
Yeah. And mysticism is also a worldview, right?
Right. Mysticism is a worldview. You want to compare apple with apple. Both have shortcomings. Okay, scientism is problematic itself because the very sentence that says only those proven in the lab can be deemed true itself cannot be proven by science.
Right.
Yep. It's
right. In order to do science at all,
it's self-defeating.
Right. It's a self-defeating argument. So to do science at all, you have to believe that doing science is noble, that integrity in doing science is important to undergird the whole apparatus of science, and that the world are to be comprehended with reason. All of these statements are not to be proven by close controlled environment in a laboratory.
So would you say the example that you said about like investigating the existence of God, for example, is that like an example of how scientific thinking as a tool can exist within a mysticism-filled worldview, or scientific thinking as a tool to investigate mysticism, like things that are within the framework of mysticism worldview?
That's right. No. Here's the thing. What's mysticism? What constitutes mysterious things?
Okay.
I mean, does belief in pelet a mysticism?
Dukun. Babi ngepet.
In my view, I mean, it is because it's mystery. Mysticism is mystery, right? There's no definite answer to it. You just
Right.
Believe it.
What about belief in God? Is that mysticism as well?
That we're going to go a big rabbit hole in that. Yeah, but
you see that's my point. When you talk about a definition, it better have a close boundary.
Yeah, I understand.
Right. And Albert Einstein actually said that the fairest things to do is to contend with the mysterious.
Yeah.
The most beautiful thing you could do with art and sciences is to contend with the mysterious. Well, does that mean Albert Einstein is mystical in his approach?
No.
So that's problematic.
Well, what about mysteries that is not falsifiable? Maybe.
Yes, you could see whether a particular mystical claim has scientific grounding.
Yep. Using this
deductive litmus test called falsifiability, like what I said.
Mm-hmm.
So. If you got a shaman say that if you put this thing in your body and you believe with all your heart,
you're gonna be healthy.
You gotta be healthy.
Yeah.
All right. So is that falsifiable? Well, let's see in a week, right? You don't get healthy. The shaman goes back to you and says, that's because you don't believe.
Yep.
You see, there's nothing that you can do to prove that wrong.
Yeah.
That is not falsifiable.
That is not falsifiable and therefore not scientific.
Right.
Is that wrong though? Maybe not. There's a because science, the real scientists are actually quite modest in saying things are like this is wrong, this is right.
Yep.
Now, people are very claimy in their approach. If you look at journal papers in mathematics or in physics or in biology, all the way from the very hard math to the engineering bit, very seldom people even dare to say the word wrong. That paper by that guy is wrong.
They don't say that.
You don't do that in scientific publishing.
Right.
I don't remember ever writing a word wrong or right in all my papers. You don't do that in science. You know what I mean?
Right.
You cannot call something wrong with 100% certainty, especially if your methodology reaching to that conclusion is inductive.
Right.
Yep.
All right. But at the popular level, all right, people just say, oh, that's wrong. That's not to be believed. Just hang on a minute. Scientists are very careful in using these terms.
Right.
The best they can say is that we don't know if that's provable yet. All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean that thing is silly and therefore to be believed? Not necessarily. But the worst thing you can do is to confuse the boundary of science as a competing paradigm with those mysticism. Because some of this so-called mysticism, like the way people believe in Nyai Roro Kidul as being the goddess of the South Sea, for example. All right, like I mentioned this in several podcasts before, right? So people in Yogyakarta believe that there is a relationship between the goddess of South Sea and the occupier of the Gunung Merapi, for example, right? The occupier, the god of Gunung Merapi. They have a relationship. So when one is angry, it will be followed by the other one responding to it. All right. And in 1960s, the expedition scientific ship from the US, Luciat and Monsoon, then brought their gravimeters and then look at the South Sea up all the way to Australia, and they found that there's a tectonic root underneath the South Sea. That says that when there is an earthquake in the South Sea, it means it will be followed soon by a volcanic activity.
Okay.
Right. So is Nyai Roro Kidul mysticism? Of course it is. Does it mean it's not useful? Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
It's an epistemology.
Right.
It's an epistemology. And if you better be knowledgeable about what it's meant for people back in the days to be able to live with uncertainties or in the middle of uncertainties. They believe in these things.
Right.
And the Dutch East Indies, when they first understand about volcanic activities, they follow the roots of all of this sesajen. Right? These are the places where are very strategic to find samples of rocks, samples of tectonic activities. They found those roots, and it was in the journal papers of the Dutch East Indies. You talk about volcanic activities in the West, for example. They don't have anything high enthalpic, which means above 600 degrees. Right. These in Iceland, for example, the geothermal activities are probably just enough to warm your water. That's it. Right. But in Indonesia, you have
insane.
high manifestation of volcanic activities. Where do you think the world study volcanic activities from?
All Indonesia.
It's in Indonesia.
All in Indonesia.
And who guided these scientists?
The sesajen.
The sesajen, these people.
Yeah.
So again, before we brush aside all of this mysticism, because some of them are indistinguishable with our identity, you better think and appreciate our ancestors first. And, and so, I could go on forever, but yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. No, it's not a competing paradigm. I love that sentence where you said science and
not always a competing.
Not always. But I got to be clear here. Yeah. If you come tomorrow, wake up in the morning, right, and then say like, I had a dream. In my dream, you have to drink this turmeric water
to be healthy,
and then you'll live forever. All right. And then I say, oh, hang on a minute, I have to prove that scientifically. No, some stupid are stupid. the difference between...
So how do you differentiate
Exactly. Now, the difference between that and the other claims about Nyai Roro Kidul is that Nyai Roro Kidul story...
has been here forever.
Has been there forever.
Forever.
Right? There is this called Lindy effects, for example. Lindy effect is a common term in the finance world.
Right.
Something that has been there forever has a higher chance of existing in the same period of time. Take pencil, for example.
It has survived all these
It has survived for a long time, and therefore has greater chance of surviving the very exact time frame. Like pencil has been with us forever, right? Even in the advent of, I don't know, pen or mouse or whatever. Because it has lasted for that long, it has greater chance for surviving.
What was the effect called?
It's Lindy effect.
Lindy effects.
Right.
The more you know.
The Jewish tradition, you study probably the Bible, for example. If you were to touch dead bodies, you're supposed to wash your hands, because that's najis. That's dirty. Well, that saved the people from being contaminated by germs.
And back then, they didn't know it was about germs.
They didn't know about germs right now. I'm not saying again that everything mystic are to be believed, but some of them is worth pursuing deeper.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to say is don't just overgeneralize everything that is within the mystic category as something that is worthless and something that needs to be brushed aside. But sometimes there is an ancient wisdom that we can derive from that. Especially if it has been there for ages, there has to be something that makes it survive all these times, right? And also from what I'm getting from you, as long as when it is scientifically tested, it has been proven to improve the survivability of, for example, human, and it has a function, for example, in terms of like human survivability or civilization. That's why that's why it survives too. Like people preserve that practice or that belief.
Two things about this. Not everybody get access to scientific thinking. We are privileged. We go to the university, you go to the classroom, you get first-class education.
Yes.
Almost all of us, right? If not all of us, are products of Western universities.
Right.
Most people aren't like that. Most people base their actions on narratives and stories and their ancestors' wisdom. And that had guided them for ages, right? Just before we brush that aside, think about it just for a minute, if you're conservative, right, it's better to follow the herd. It's better. That gives you the greater chance of surviving. That has been the way people survive. Those who are privileged, like us, able to enjoy higher education, are to find solid grounding for those ancestral beliefs, to see whether one is scientifically sound and which one is not, for example. And then the world's supposed to have that standard so that people who even have no access to journal papers can then see people like you and I who graduated from reputable universities and say, well, this guy sounds sensible. I don't exactly understand what he's talking about, but maybe I should believe him because that gives me the greater chance of surviving. The problem in Indonesia, I'm segueing a little bit, but the problem in Indonesia is that the university fails to serve as that standard.
Yes.
Right? Because you see these full professors got humiliated having their full professorship revoked because of silly idea of plagiarism. And the university gets down into this silly business with the government and stuff like that. Now that is very dangerous because sooner or later, probably sooner, people will start to realize that there is absolutely no way nor merit within this institution, I shouldn't look at them at all whatsoever. And when the society renders university useless, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, we're in big trouble.
Where do you think Indonesia is at in that?
Very silly, very problematic, and people think about it as funny, right? This 11 full professor from Lambung Mangkurat University got the professorship revoked because they published about Pancasila in a fishery journal, for example. Something silly like that. I don't know if that's true. That needs to be corroborated. But if it were true, that would make people very, very disappointed. And when you lose that standard, and then critical events like pandemic takes place, where do you think these people will resort to base their actions? Well, they're tribals, they're shamans, they're religious authority, and then no wonder we're in such a mess and in very fragile state because you have no standards at all. And well, I could go on in saying how that happens, but that's the reality in Indonesia.
Right.
You see. Another thing is this university-style meritocratic system. It's not the default condition of humankind. We only have meritocracy.
We're very new to that.
We're very new to meritocracy. Yeah.
Right. Throughout the ages, we are hereditarian. Right. Why should we have equal rights? You're not sons of kings. You're not daughters of
It's
leaders.
a very fairly relatively new concept.
That's very
in humanity.
new, and therefore can be deprived of us very quickly.
Right.
You know. So.
Okay, I'm gonna shift a bit because
go for it. In
What Is Up Indonesia, we always talk about, because most of our audience here are diaspora, international raised Indonesians, the culture kids. This is gonna maybe sound a bit normative, or maybe. It's a question I want to ask you personally. So you've been in the UK for how long now?
In the UK for 10 years, including my postdoc.
Right. I'm assuming, and my assumption is, you're living a good life out of all. You're living an okay life in the UK. So, outside of your personal family, mom and dad in Jakarta or whatever. Look, this might seem such a broad question. Do you have hope for this country or not? Because to be honest, a lot of WIUI, What Is Up Indonesia viewers and followers,
they're losing hope. On all sector.
Especially, there's a saying that ignorance is bliss, right? There's a saying that ignorance is bliss. And clearly, for people who know, the opposite of ignorance is bliss is, oh my holy shit, it's all this shit, it's fucked up. Forgive my language. Clearly, you know lebih dalam about the fucked upness of Indonesia. So with all that being said, do you feel that there's hope in Indonesia? And if you do, what is your strategy or what is your plan? What I know this is a very big, broad question.
Yes.
But I got to ask you this question.
I could share my global perspective, looking at Indonesia from people outside Indonesia, is that, well, two things. Among forces that are very dominant in determining people's actions, one that I think will be growingly important is geopolitical forces. For two reasons. I think the finitude of natural resources is going to play a big role in the international geopolitics. Indonesia has that natural resources, and therefore it will become significantly important. All right.
That's what China wants us. That's what America wants us.
Certainly. You talk about energy. There you go. I just mentioned about 50% of geothermal power on our feet. Another thing is that I don't believe there's a binding morality at international stage. It's only binding insofar as it coincides with national interest.
Right.
But if it doesn't coincide with national interest, well, Russia will start, invading people because it doesn't adhere with their national interest. So in the absence of absolute morality, there is nothing that would prohibit China or the other big countries for not interfering with Indonesia. Now, I don't think they're going to bombard us with missiles.
No.
Right?
It's a different world now. They don't do that anymore.
Right. They don't do that anymore because of whatever reasons. Right. And so we cannot help but keep becoming significant. So we hold the key. I know that whether or not you use that key to become somebody superior at the global stage, or you become just users of new technology that is force-fed down your throat, it's another matter.
Right.
So hope is there, particularly because of the potential alone.
Okay.
The potential is undeniably, so the hope is there.
But the key word is the potential. Are we going to use that potential?
We're a potential country.
We're a potential.
Will we ever realize that potential?
But the potential has been there forever.
Exactly.
Right. And then segueing to the second part of your question is what we should do about it. Now, I think what Indonesia really is lacking is a convincing narrative.
Okay. Please talk me on this.
Narrative is something to be brushed aside as something less important than the scientific rigor. For example, narrative is very important. Narrative base people's actions.
Can you explain more what you mean by narrative?
Yeah.
Well, what's China's narrative?
China's narrative is...
It's in their names.
Yeah, it's... China wants everything. That's why they're building One Belt Road. They just want...
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's why they're building the One Belt Road to Pakistan, to Africa.
Okay.
I mean, they want
exactly
unity, and China controls everything.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing it. Very bad paraphrasing.
Because it's in their name.
Yeah.
Zhongguo. We're in the center of the world.
Center of the world. That's why they want the whole thing.
Right.
Okay.
We're the center of the world.
Yeah.
All right.
And even Japan sort of has a narrative where... Okay, let's stick with China then. Japan is
some are more explicit than others.
Yeah.
Obviously, where the US probably sees themselves as the bearer of democracy and liberal values. For example,
bring democracy to all of you.
Fine, that's narrative.
Okay, I got it. So it's kind of like the story we tell ourselves.
The story you tell ourselves. Does that mean China believe in mysticism? They don't believe that the earth is round. Of course, they believe the world is round. But we're the center. Yeah. You see, that's not a scientific claim, isn't it?
No.
That's a story that is undergirded by their local identity.
Okay.
All right. That shapes the geopolitics of China and that of Russia and that of USA. Right. Now, let me ask you a question. Look, what's ours?
To be honest, right now, I have no idea. All we know now is Indonesia Emas 2045. Like there's no strong narrative.
Maybe like the closest.
There is none.
The closest is, I guess, the Pancasila, like unity and diversity, things like that. I think that's the closest that I guess we're trying to tell ourselves. A lot of people.
But the closest, and even Poros Maritim is like one of the. You're right. We don't have.
We don't have. Look, I mean, let's get technical here. What's a narrative? Narrative in literary science means that two or more events, either real or fictive or factual, in a time sequence. Yeah. In a mathematical scene, it means like something that you can extrapolate, so you know where you're going to end up one day. All right?
Okay.
So these words like Indonesia Emas 2045, it's not a narrative.
It's a goal.
It can't do anything about it. Yeah. It doesn't specify how we're going to get there.
Okay.
Indonesia negara besar, that's just one event.
Yeah. What's in the future? Where is that?
Indonesia is a big country. Well, so what?
So what? Yeah.
What is it going to do about it? The Chinese, even though very simple, we're the center of the world, it bears an implicit understanding that all roads
lead to China.
Lead to China, like Rome.
Got it.
Yeah.
Right? And therefore, it shapes our way of doing geopolitics. We're going to invest heavily on infrastructures, etc. You get the point.
Yeah.
Right? Indonesia has that narrative. Now, my thesis is that that narrative are not to be just invented overnight. The central government cannot just say, okay, guys, here's our narrative.
No.
Narrative is binding. It's the basis of the imagined communities. Ben Anderson says that it's that thing that makes you cry when Frederick and Gregoria got the medals.
The medals for Olympics.
That narrative makes you want to die for the country.
Right.
All right. Now, my thesis is that narrative is already here, but at the local level. The Minangkabauan had their own narrative about how they are supposed to operate in the world. The Bugis people has their own narrative. It's in their 1.5 times longer literary magnum opus, longer than Mahabharata.
Oh wow! I did not know this. I did not know the Bugis had this, but thank you for telling me.
Yeah, it's called Lagaligo. It's a story about the hero of Ilagaligo, son of Saweri Gading. It tells you about the creation of the world. Is that mystic? Of course. It is.
Yeah.
Of course. That's not the point. The point is that it bears the ethos of Bugis people. It tells you what a perfect Bugis people is supposed to act. Right. And how they should navigate in the world.
This is very interesting.
Right? Are we the steward of the earth?
Yes,
are we to see people as equal? Are we supposed to see people beyond their social status and geographical places? What are we to the world?
Oh shit!
You see, that's narrative.
Wait, it's opening my. Sorry to cut you off, but it's opening my brain because we kind of sort of have that in like the Majapahit era. We sort of had this. Sorry, the stewards of the world, right? That's a very. When you said that, it hit something. I don't know what hit with me, but
sure,
it kind of like. Especially because of our natural resources, it's always been there in Indonesia that we are the stewards of the world.
Yeah.
Sort of. But sorry to cut you off, but you said the Minangkabau has it, the Bugis has it. So if I were to ask you now, do we extrapolate from the Minangkabau and Bugis?
I don't think so.
Okay, so what do we do now? So what do we do then?
No, do we yet extracted out of the Minangkabauan? I don't think so at the national level.
Okay, got it.
We should be listening to them.
Okay.
We should extract out of those local wisdoms.
So that is so interesting, because when you think about it, Indonesia as a country is unique in the sense that we are made out of different tribes, different culture, that probably have different narratives that resonates with different people. So how do we find one unifying narrative that hits all of Indonesian? Is it even possible, right?
Right. Here's my thesis. I've never mentioned this elsewhere. I think for Indonesia to succeed, it has to embody that, what I would call a walled garden.
Sorry, a what?
A walled garden ideology.
Oh,
all right.
Okay.
Strong liberal values inside and strong nationalistic outside. All right.
Okay, please elaborate. Please.
Here's the thing. Where does meritocracy come from? From strong liberal value. That's why in the universities they call it liberal arts, because it has liberal values there. That is to say that humans as an individual are not able to agree with each other, and they need states to arbitrate problems in between them. And then the way you do that is by introducing that notion of rights. And therefore private property, and to instill equality, that people can climb up the hierarchy of socioeconomic values regardless of who their father, mother are, right? And then so those are strong core liberal values. And implicit in between those pillars is meritocracy, obviously, because you're supposed to go to the top regardless of who your ancestors is, right? Now, that breeds meritocracy and therefore economic success. There's not one country in this world that can get through economic success without some degree of liberal values. Even China.
Even China is liberal.
Even a very nationalistic authoritarian regime like China carved within China a little bit of liberal values, at least at the economic domain. Right? Fuck all with all that other domains, but this one.
Domain,
excuse my language.
It's okay. It's okay.
I don't care about the social values, but there's always that garden in the walled buildings. All right.
Okay.
But at the international level, nationalism reigns supreme.
Okay.
All right. At the international level, because of the absence of binding morality, you got to be very nationalistic. And that's what the United States has been doing so far, which backfires eventually. But they've been very nationalistic in their doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine, for example. Nobody's going to build power at the east coast of the United States, for example. We're going to spread democracy of the world. We are exceptional. These are nationalistic values, right? And that's what makes U.S. to some degree successful, because that veneer of nationalism is undergirded by competence that breed out of that liberal values inside United States. All right.
Okay.
What do you have if you have a country that is so nationalistic without liberal value inside? You got North Korea.
Okay.
All right. It's not functioning well.
It's the other side of the spectrum.
Right. What do you have? A country that has strong liberal values and no nationalism at all? Well, nobody agree on anything. Because individuality, by definition, will make people go in each direction. They couldn't agree with each other. They couldn't have a binding narrative. So Indonesia must have that. The problem with us is that now the question is, why can't we do that for so long? Indonesia has diversity, which is its own blessing, but also burden. To get that strong liberal value within Indonesia, you have to make sure that people's rights are respected. And that includes fair representation of all ethnic groups and languages in Indonesia, which is now not the case. One culture is a lot more dominant than others. And therefore, looking purely as seeing things as a landscape of power, one tends to dominate the others. So the others don't feel like they are needed. They don't feel like their rights are respected. So unless and until we respect everybody inside the boundary of the country, and that includes the Bugisian, the Minangkabauan, the Papuan, we will not have that meritocracy inside Indonesia. You have to make sure there's a fair representation. What did Singapore do? Because they're also diverse, right? They used draconian measure.
The economy was crazy back in the day.
Right. In public housing in Singapore, I want 25% occupancy of all ethnic groups. Draconian.
Very draconian.
But then they flipped their diversity as strength. Because of that. Everybody in Singapore feel like they are part of the Singaporean.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? And the meritocracy come from there. Even though I'm Tamil or I'm Malayan, I'm Chinese, I'm respected there. Now, The problem with Indonesia, that's the internal problem. The external is even more worrisome. If you look at the way our foreign diplomacy and our diplomats, they preach nationalism inward, not outward.
Not outward.
I mean, if I go to one of the colleges in Oxford, right, it's always a courtyard surrounded by buildings. That's what I meant by walled garden. There's a little bit of nature inside order that human created.
Okay.
Right? That's the thing. So there's this fertile ground from which life emerges, which is, I think, metaphorically a liberal value.
Okay.
Undergirded or surrounded by order, nationalistic, uniform approach, like that. And no wonder the university has always been the microcosm of the world, and therefore that structure in the colleges in Oxford University really epitomize how the United Kingdom or England actually behaves at a macroscopic level.
Oh, I love that.
So there's always, and that also segueing into what university is supposed to serve in the country. Yeah. It's supposed to become a microcosm of the country from which new ideas emerge, and therefore you got a tenured professor, so they can say stupid stuff without fearing losing their job, something like that.
Yeah.
So that's my idea of a walled garden.
So when you say walled garden, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but the one thing that came to my mind is that a garden consists of different types of plants and ecosystem, right?
Okay, yeah.
Like there's grass, there's trees, there's flowers, there's different, and I feel like that's a really good way of encapsulating Indonesia's diversity as well. Like
walled garden,
there's a different types of plants and living things inside of it, but it's not cannibalizing or going against each other. It's helping one another as an ecosystem to thrive.
We gotta find the Indonesian the translation to walled garden. What is it? Taman tembok. I'm very bad at this.
I think if you treat this carefully, Indonesia can have hell of a garden, because we have one of the nicest flowers and everything else.
Right.
But it depends on whether the soil is fertile or not, right?
Right.
And
who
that
waters
soil.
it? And who waters it? Who's watering the gardens?
Speaking metaphorically here, of course.
And who's putting up the wall?
Okay.
Right.
And who gets to choose which seed are dispersed or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I love this walled garden thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna read more into it. I'm honestly gonna read more into it.
It's his idea, right?
Yeah.
Is it your original?
I coined the terms.
Okay. Right.
Obviously, in the context of what we were just talking about. But if you want to understand a little bit about nationalism and its interplay with liberalism, you can refer to the likes of John Mearsheimer, or other colleagues like Francis Fukuyama and others. But I think insofar as the recipe that I would like to offer to Indonesia, that would be something like that.
Okay. Wow, guys, listen, kalau di kata bahasa Indonesia daging semua. I'm talking about very, very
all meat here.
All meat.
So we're now we would like to now transition to the more. That was fun.
Okay. All right.
No, I love that.
But
I love that.
You know, you got to do it for the algorithm and the Instagram and the TikTok. So I want to ask you like just light questions.
All right.
We're gonna play a game. We're gonna review memes.
Yeah.
But before that, I want to know, what book are you reading right now? Okay. And what books do you recommend young Indonesian students to read?
Oh, definitely. Fundamentals of Fluid Mechanics.
Okay, wow. So let's all read Fundamentals.
Go read that.
The Fluid Mechanics.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Wow. Let me just read that.
He didn't even hesitate.
He didn't hesitate.
Fundamentals of Fluid Mechanics.
Quantum physics for newbies. For
no, that's okay.
All right.
Are you reading anything fictional right now? Are you reading anything fictional? I mean, I know.
Yes. Okay. Well, okay. Yeah. So my wife is German, so I've been reading some of the books my wife read to my kids. These are Pippi Langstrom. These ideas.
Oh, Pippi Langstrom. Yeah.
The girl.
Kafka. No.
Okay.
The Beatles. The Metamorphosis. Kafka. No.
The Gulag Archipelago.
No.
Okay.
That's a bit heavy, Mom. Okay. Stories. I think Indonesia has a lot of stories that are not. I think Indonesian youngs nowadays are not exposed to the very good stories of Malin Kundang, which is
a lot of people don't know Malin Kundang.
Sangkuriang, which is which is a very common philosophical story.
Yeah.
A lot of our stories, like I mentioned to you about Lagaligo, you couldn't find the manuscript in Indonesia. You could have to find it in the West.
Oh.
So even the of the Bugis people, the Lagaligo, you find it in the West.
You find it in the West. They even make a whole theatrical play there.
Really?
What?
Yeah, in the Netherlands.
Wow. I mean, thank you, Netherlands, for that.
Well, thank you very much. We still need a visa to go there.
Yeah, why do we need a visa? Hello, the Dutch
Why
people.
Netherlands?
I don't need a visa. Any questions from you, Abigail? Before we go to the meme review, like books, movies. Like,
Me?
Yeah, no, for to him.
Like, what do you mean?
Like fun questions, like what movies you wanna? Because I'm
Anything,
Okay,
man.
interested what
yeah,
I'm interested
yeah,
what
yeah.
you are consuming, because you can tell a lot by people from what they consume.
Yeah. What Netflix show are you currently watching, if any? Or it doesn't have to be Netflix.
What TV show? What
TV
movie?
show?
Attack on Titan.
Oh my God! Wow. Okay, now.
Okay, no.
Well, I could go.
No.
Yeah, well, no.
No.
Yeah, I know.
Weeboos. That's the What Is Up Indonesia community.
We did a whole like IG live about that.
Oh, that is
discussing.
fantastic. Yeah, I gotta convince my wife why I spent the entire 5 years of my life watching. But that's fascinating.
Dude, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we can go on a tangent. If you go Attack on Titan, we can go on a tangent.
No, okay.
No, but on serious note, guys, we need great literary works.
We
I agree.
do, and it.
We do.
I agree.
And Attack on Titan is such a great
This
literary
is fantastic,
work.
and it's not even
Oh my
ancient, right? So
No, it's not. It's not. Maybe we should have another episode where we just talk about Attack on Titan.
I would love it.
yeah,
I would be down. Okay. Anyway, so I have this idea. I don't know if this will be fun or not.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see.
We'll see. We're
I'm gonna
trying.
show you some memes
And just react
that
to them.
might be related a little bit ish to
Yeah.
the current topic that we're talking about.
you'll be disappointed,
And-
but for sure.
Just
I'm about to look at your screen. Okay, all right.
Yeah, just comment on it.
All right.
Just comment it.
Okay,
And
so
you
this is the-
you can even comment seriously on it because
Yeah, you
it's not this.
Oh,
I
okay.
haven't shown.
All right, okay.
All right, this is the first one.
I can see your browsing
Okay.
history.
Thanks.
Indonesian
You haven't
studying STEM
seen
fields.
this,
I
right?
haven't. So I'm reacting to that.
Oh, well, okay. Well, that's a pessimistic view. I can relate to that, yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, sadly, yeah. Sadly, yeah.
You would be like.
Well, we
you're
have no
agreeing.
Nobel Prize winners for that, for one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, almost all advancement in STEM are not. We used to be the country from which new spectacular sciences, even Nobel Prize worthy findings, were experimented on. It was
Really?
here, you know, at the time when Wallace, together with Darwin, laid the foundation of evolutionary biology.
Yeah.
For example, they did it in the Wallacea region in Indonesia. For example, we used to be that beriberi as a disease, for example, was first studied in Indonesia. Tropical diseases, we have all the potentials, but then it's just potentials.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting here is Indonesian STEM achievement from local institution, because I think a lot of Indonesians that are studying STEM made great achievement outside.
This is problems, you know, because if you go outside, especially if you go on government scholarship, you have to immediately come back.
Right. The
LPDP problem. Yes.
Right, you cannot grow your wings outside, and no wonder.
All right.
Okay, next. That was the first meme.
If
See?
you call this pessimistic, wait till you see.
Wait till you see all the memes.
Oh, shit.
This is how Gen Alpha
All right,
communicates.
it needs a bit to digest. Okay, all right, yeah.
What do you feel about
What do you
Look,
think?
I have a lot of professor friends in Indonesia, so I can really relate to this.
Yeah.
They're heavily laden with administrative works. They have known human resources to help them with their research.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm a benefactor of a good environment here. For example, I
Yeah.
have a postdoc, I have PhD students, I have a great team. Everybody wants to work in the UK, and I
Right.
benefited from that human capital.
Would
But you're right, yeah.
So would you say this is like an accurate
An accurate
depiction?
meme?
Well, look at that horse, for example, right? It's barely surviving. It even lost its horn.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's from a
And
unicorn.
this is like the usual like government
propaganda.
propaganda
It's
or
like, hey guys, come on,
imploring,
come here, blah,
be
blah,
a
blah,
scientist,
be a scientist.
and then they become a scientist. And
Well, one thing that I want to comment on that is, you know, science don't just shine in itself by one person doing great science. It's the
It's a
whole
lot of-
ecosystem that counts.
it's an ecosystem. Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yep. Exactly. It's kind of like your walled garden thing. Like you cannot expect the flowers and the trees and the grass to grow if the soil is not fertile, right?
Right, or if you protect it from external threats, which is what the wall is supposed to serve as.
Okay.
All right, next.
The guy looks familiar.
Indonesians moving abroad, innovative research skills and scientific expertise. Do you get? I get it, but let's see, because he's the your.
This is him.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
So it's bringing a big bag of innovation, research skills. It's like a brain drain phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah. This is a Gen Z, Gen Alpha way of communicating and information.
All right.
Because I think you're the first millennial generation. Right?
I would count myself as a millennial.
No, because you were born
1983, 84.
1984 was the first millennial above.
Okay.
He's the cutoff of the.
Thanks for reminding that. No, I don't believe in brain drain.
Okay, elaborate.
Here's the thing. I think the Chinese had that same problems when they were sending millions of people to study abroad and only hundreds of thousands come back. And at the time in the 70s, they think of it as brain drain. But look at where these magnificent Chinese now in the global multinational company, right? They're occupying strategic places. Yeah. And therefore bringing the Indians, for example, are everywhere. Yeah. So it's just a matter of long-term investments.
But that is as long as they are still connected with like a unifying narrative of that nationalism, right?
Exactly.
As long as they don't cut ties. It's the diaspora nationalism that we talked about previously also. But without that, this is true. Or
can I say a paragraph on this, for example?
Of course. Yeah.
The LPDP slogan is to mengabdi untuk negara, which means to enslave yourself for the country. Right? That's a strong word. You cannot say those words in the UK. Like, here's Chevening scholarship, enslave yourself for the country. Okay. You'll be out of the window right now. I don't mean that serving the country is something negative. Right. But one should understand that you are Indonesia, by the way, Andovi and Abigail. You are Indonesia. You are the sprinkle of Indonesia in you. Serving the country means serving you. To become the most competent person. If I were to rehearse all of those slogans, I would say just, here's the scholarship, be the best.
Yep.
Wherever you are.
Right.
The country benefits from you being the best. Your family benefited from you being the best. The community being the best. You come back home and you're nobody. Even though you have the strongest will to help the country, you're not going to help much.
Yep.
Only if you're powerful.
Right.
That's very philosophical, actually.
I love
because we are Indonesians, and if we serve ourselves, we are serving Indonesia.
We implicitly serve our country if we serve ourselves.
It's not a zero-sum game. Where did you find all these memes?
We made it.
Oh, you made it.
What is up, Indonesia? The Discord community is amazing.
Oh, I see.
They have a big Discord community, and they made this.
Indo government to the scientists. That's not how we say it. No, this is true. I mean, some of my friends have problems. I won't call them friends. Some of my colleagues have friends conducting research in Indonesia because of the problems they would find in the custom, for example, when it comes to conducting experiments here. For example, sending samples into and out from Indonesia. Right. You'll need a lot of justification as to why that is not coinciding with the national interest and something like that.
Yeah. Like scientific research here kind of needs to align itself with national interest.
Okay.
That's why that's not how
research here works.
I gotta say one thing. The homework is also for the Indonesian academics to struggle. I know they're struggling, but to struggle even more to make the policies undergirded by science. They have to fill the public spheres with scientific thinking. So it's not just, who is the government? The government is just people like you and me.
Yep, it's us.
All right, you're blaming them. You probably get into the government one day, you wouldn't know. Then you will become part of the system, right? So institutions have no responsibility. People have responsibility, right? The government is just the building. You and I have responsibility.
Right. So would you say we need more scientists with scientific thinking to go into the
government? Go out there, you got to use your voice. Nowadays you can just go to TikTok and make memes like this. Right? Well, let's work together.
Yep.
Let's go. Okay, next.
Last one.
Dari mana duitnya?
Do you know this? Do you know this video?
Yeah, it's a very famous.
This is a very
viral video.
Yeah, I think I know. Okay. I know. It's a very rich cleric or something.
Yeah. Mana duitnya? Mana duitnya?
Yeah.
So what do you think about this?
Our spending for research and innovation is one of the smallest, not in the world, but even in Asia, even in Southeast Asia.
Oh wow!
Both in terms of percentage and hard value. Damn. So I sympathize with Indonesian researchers unable to do first-class sciences because there's just no money. I must say that the big four university or big five, okay, because ITB, for example, is ranked 280 in the world. Yeah. Not saying that university ranking is a sole criteria for performance, but they actually punch above their weight. Right? When it comes to some British universities, they charges you 10 times the tuition fee, but they are ranked above 1,000 in the world. So you got to have a little bit of respect of Indonesian institutions. They are performing well above their weight. Yeah. So, but yeah, money talks.
Right.
Yep, absolutely. Well,
that was the last meme.
That was the last meme.
Last meme you get.
Yep.
First of all, thank you. We really appreciate you coming in and talking to us about this. I'm very glad that I talked to you.
Same.
I did watch your interview with Pagita.
Thank you.
And it really opened up my eyes as well about like. Here's my tidbit.
Yeah.
We have a lot of podcasts in Indonesia, but I think these podcasts focus on, of course, the distractions, artists, musicians, content creators like myself. I really think that they should be more focused on people like you, not just like you, but everybody else. Because
please, yes, I want all the attention, please.
Yes, yeah. Why? Because I'm gonna give an example in the US, right? In the US. One of my most favorite podcasts ever is Andrew Huberman.
I see. Okay.
Andrew Huberman is an ophthalmologist and neuroscientist, where he makes science actionable and he gives it straight to laymen like me who are not into science. And Pagita and a few others are trying to start that.
Yep.
Where stop talking about all this stupid drama and all this stupid shit. But it's a reflection of the country. The reason why Andrew Huberman works in the Western society is because people watch that. He gets millions of views. And I love watching Andrew Huberman. Like all of his protocols, really like cold water, whatever, sunshine, whatever. Like I learned from a science-based podcast. And I just wish like more people like you get interviewed in the Indonesian entertainment industry. That's from my perspective.
But actually, if I saw your interview too with Pagita, right? And the view is almost 1 million, by the way.
Which means it's great.
Which means I feel like, you know how like popular mainstream shows and podcasts or show just in general, they always say like, oh yeah, we can't give people like shows or topics that are too heavy. People like
no one's gonna
watch. It's blah blah blah. Yeah. I feel like that's an assumption.
That's an assumption.
But in reality, actually, when you do provide them with with content that are not watered down, they're unashamed of talking about the big questions. People watch it. There's a hunger for that in this country too, I believe.
You asked me earlier if I was optimistic, and some of the viewers of my podcast or even the one that we produce ourselves has been, why is your language so difficult to understand when I speak Indonesian, for example? Well, the short answer, for the first time I say it in public, is that I don't want to insult your intelligence by dumbing down my message. And so, you could pause the video and I want you to watch it so that you get something out of it. You can watch it, go to Google, come back there again. You know what I mean?
Thank you very much.
So for all of these content creators, just expose yourself to difficult topics. And
because that's how you learn.
That's
how you learn. So don't just... And I think public likes that. They've been fed with infantilization for too long.
So good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Last. Okay. Who do you recommend we interview next?
Oh, yeah.
Like, because the people in the comments always write, but I want you like hey, Andovi, Abigail, why not this guy? And it doesn't have to be someone that's known. Maybe some Indonesian that you know is brilliant abroad.
Okay.
And who knows? I don't know.
I wouldn't say name, because if I say names, then the other people who didn't get named would be like, why didn't you name me?
Yeah.
No, but I want you to interview people who have not of very high public stature. For example, the people who understand where keris come from, who understands batik, right? Who understand Indonesian core values. You have to unearth these people so that they get more exposure. A lot more brilliant minds in Indonesia. I'm not talking only in the academic settings. Don't get the attention that they deserve.
Got it. I like that.
Right.
So comment below. Who knows the weeboos out there? If you know people who know about the story of the keris and the batiks and the experts and that. I get it right.
Yep. My father. No, I'm kidding.
All right. Oh, thank you so much, Bagus.
Thank you so much.
See you on our next podcast.
See you in the next episode. Bye.
Cheers. Pleasure.
Thank you. I really